Hello, everyone. Welcome to Age Well with Joy. I'm Joy, the CEO for Age Smart Community Resources, your area agency on aging in the Metro East. Today we're here and we're going to talk about caregiving and some resources and experiences of caregivers. Today we have Connie Turner and Rita Boyd, who are members of the board of directors for Age Smart, and Vanita Dixon, who's a member of Age Smart's Advisory Council, and Chris, our home and community-based service manager. The one thing we all have in common, we are caregivers. If I could call on you to share some of your experiences. Vanita, share your experiences as a caregiver.
I'm sorry. We have a clock that chimes on the hour and is playing music.
My mother-in-law had clocks all over her house. It was really awesome, and they all rang.
My husband and I became caregivers for my mother, who suffered from dementia. My dad had passed away about 10 years before, and she lived in a home for about 40 years, so she was very comfortable there. She had taken my grandmother in who had dementia, and she ended up having to have her admitted to a nursing home. But while she was dealing with my grandmother's issues, her issues started becoming apparent. So it was a situation where, we lived far away. I don't have siblings, and we lived about 30 minutes away. So it was pretty difficult to keep tabs and check on her. We didn't have very many relatives in the area. So what we did was to build a home so that we could all move in together and be able to look after her. We actually went from assuming small responsibilities over time to assuming complete responsibility. She was with us for about 15 years, and she went from someone who could dress herself and walk and feed herself to someone who was totally incapacitated and not able to do anything. So we had her until she passed, actually at home here with us.
Thank you. And Connie, Age Smart has known the person you're caring for some time. Can you share some about your experiences as a caregiver?
Sure. My experiences were, I don't want to say more external, I guess, in that my mom always lived independently. She never lived in my home. And she lived alone. But at some point when I would stop in to visit, I started seeing things like second invoices, second notices lying around, envelopes with stamps that hadn't been mailed. If I did get a chance by some method to look at her checkbook, a lot of cross-outs, no reconciliation. And she was always very proud of her ability to stay on top of things like that. And so at some point I needed to started taking things on like banking and then med management. We had some driving issues that had to be addressed kind of as a result of an accident and so on. But she's never lived with me. So a lot of the caregiving experiences that people have and struggle with and find particularly challenges, I can't really address, but I know others can, so.
Thank you. And Rita, you and I have known each other for a long time. We met when I was working at the Adult Day program that Vanita's grandmother actually went to, and mother for a little bit of time. Can you share a little bit about your caregiving experience?
Yes, I've been a caregiver. It's hard to tell when this begins. It's sometimes so very subtle. 4 to 5 years for my older parents. And also folded in there was a disabled aunt for a while that my mom was caregiver for, that when she began to have some loss of capacity, I had to assume some of that too. My dad's caregiving needs were more because of his physical frailty, and my mom's were more for her dementia. And my aunt was also physical frailty. My dad passed away about 2 years ago. 2.5 years ago. My mom has been, we moved them from their home into assisted living. And then after Dad passed away, Mom ended up with memory care. And we had a short stint as providing in-home care. At the beginning of COVID, she spent 3 months with us. So yeah, that's rough going.
I'm sure it was hard bringing her back, and then hard having to bring her back to the
Yeah,
assisted living.
yeah, not
So,
easy.
no. But Chris, can you share a little bit about, you have been a caregiver. You and I both cared for our mother-in-laws at the same time and lost them very close together. But can you share a little bit about that, and also some of the resources that Age Smart has for caregivers?
Sure. Kind of like Rita, my husband and I were caring for my mother-in-law, but that also included my younger brother-in-law who was disabled. So we were caregivers for both of them. My mother-in-law had Lewy bodies dementia, and through a series of events, she was able to hide it and hide it very well. And she had a little assistance not on purpose, but because of their living situation, my brother-in-law helped hide that a little bit from the rest of the family. So they coped together with it. When he moved out, it became quite obvious. As a matter of fact, when everything broke loose for me, I was actually in the back of an Uber, going from an N4A conference in downtown Chicago back to Midway Airport to fly home, when my mother-in-law called me in a panic. And I'm trying to have another call with my husband and his sister going, what do you got to get over there? There's something not right. Somebody needs to get over there. So it was a shocking, that was my shocking moment for it. And then we had a talk and went from there with our journey. Our journey with my mother-in-law ended the 3rd of January this year, and unfortunately 3 weeks later my brother-in-law then passed after surgery that he never woke up from. So it was kind of, the brakes kind of went on real quick for our caregiving journey, and we just talked about it and said, it's kind of odd, a month later. One thing my sister-in-law's husband said is, Chris, what do people who don't have you, and my husband Steve said, what do people do who don't have you? You guys know the answers when we have a question about Medicaid or what services are available. We've got you, or in the family. And I honestly told him, I said, I certainly hope they would pick up the phone and call Age Smart. That would be my hope, is that caregivers who don't know what they're doing, who don't know even what questions to ask, would pick up the phone and give us a call. Our information assistance staff can help with a whole arrangement of questions. In addition to that, we also have a caregiver counseling program. We also have a respite program that provides respite for the caregiver, gives them a break, lets them go out, I say do their personal business. We also have savvy caregiver programs throughout the area that helps caregivers with hints and tips on how to deal with their loved one, and some of the behaviors that care recipient may be exhibiting. There's also a stress busting program that goes hand in hand with Savvy Caregiver. It is strictly for the caregiver. It's what the caregiver can do for themselves. We also have a caregiver conference that we try to do yearly. We are looking to do that again next year. That gives caregivers the chance to come together and realize they're not alone. Hear information that will help them as a caregiver take care of their loved one and take care of themselves. We have also been working with Adaptive Equipment a Corner. They have a series of videos for caregivers on how to use home equipment, things like canes, transfer benches, bedside commodes, mechanical lifts, wheelchairs, scooters. They also have a checklist, a home safety checklist that is available to all of them. And it goes room by room through the house, starting at the front door. And checklist of things to look for: throw rugs, extension cords. In addition, we have just started a Caregiver Connection Facebook page. We are working on that with St. John's Community Care and Adaptive Equipment Corner. We're also going to be working with Southwestern Illinois Visiting Nurses and Memory Care Home Solutions for that. But it's a place on social media that caregivers can go.
Thanks, Chris. So, caregiving is probably the most important thing we can do and role in our lives, but there are challenges. Vanita, can you share some of your biggest challenges as a caregiver?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge was learning to become a parent to a parent. I think that's always difficult for everybody. We're not used to telling our parents what to do and taking over their affairs, especially if you have independent parents who do everything for themselves and know how to do everything. It's difficult to transition, even when you're doing personal care and things like that. Try to figure just what that person can do for themselves versus what you need to do for them. That's probably one of the biggest challenges. And then the other thing is their business affairs, things like powers of attorney and paying bills, seeing their bank accounts, or if they have any other funds, et cetera. People keep those things personal and close to their vest. And it's kind of hard to get them to let you in. Things like stopping driving. There are, things like that are telling that parent what to do was a little bit difficult. So I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges.
And I think, Rita, you probably can ditto that a little bit, but share a little bit about your biggest challenges.
Yeah, I think knowing when to step in, I think for you, Joy, and Chris and myself, who have worked in the aging industry, it was just as challenging. You know what you're seeing, the handwriting is on the wall, that there are problems, but it's still, this is the person that you've gone to and laid your problems at their feet over the years, and now you see that they're having problems, and it's very emotionally difficult to have to present that to them, and you don't want to be disrespectful and have them lose face, because they're very proud and used to being the head of the family and the resource for the family. And I can remember my mom saying, well, we are always the people that everybody came to, and now we need you, you have to do for us, and this is just wrong. And it's like, oh, it was terrible. Just, it still breaks my heart at some junctures, but I think the initial stage of having to step in and push the issue was the most challenging and disturbing.
I think the interesting thing is, Chris and I and Connie, we've only had one child. So that caregiver experience is going to be really different when they're caring for us, if that happens. Connie, can you share some of your biggest challenges?
Well, not only have I had just one child, but I also was an only child with no siblings or others that I can lean on. And again, to restate something that we've already heard, and that was, it was so difficult to know when to step in and do what needed to be done to protect my mom's personal safety, her financial safety, and yet at the same time allow her some level of independence to whatever her level of capabilities were, and that obviously changed over time. But how to do that, and I do have to say, my mom was always very proud about how she handled her finances, all on her own. She never let me in on much, just obviously what she wanted to, which wasn't as much as it needed to be. But I was actually, we had a debit card incident, and I was actually able to go down to the bank with her, and the banker and I communicated in a way such that we were able to do what needed to be done, which again was maybe separate accounts, one that I managed and one that she had. Because of a phishing incident with one of her debit cards, we needed to limit the exposure for her, but yet it still gave her an account, a credit card that she could use if she wanted to, and against which no one could do a whole lot of damage if they got into either of those accounts. And the medication issue was very difficult because she always administered her own meds. And when it was time to do something about that, and the doctor suggested, well, maybe you can fill her pill boxes together, and then take the bottles home. No, that did not go over well at all. And I know everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about, because mixed in with all of this is levels of paranoia. There are delusions, there's hostility, there are, interpersonal, dynamics that you've never had to deal with your parents. And I think that trying to manage that yourself emotionally can be very, very difficult.
Right. And it's really interesting, the similarities that people have, but families are so different, and the dynamics, usually that's what we see a lot, is the family dynamics. And we've got smaller families here today, so that's kind of interesting. Maybe we have it a little easier, I don't know, or harder sometimes. But so if each of you had one piece of advice for caregivers, what would that be? Rita, how about you?
Well, it's hard to limit it to one, but one that really bubbles to the top is that you need a partnership with the person who's providing the health care, the medical care for your parent, and a good line of communication that you can, a trusting relationship, you can share what's going on, because if you accompany your parent to the doctor as an interpreter, a lot of times it'll be everything is fine, fine, fine. And if the physician is in a hurry that day or not asking some real pointed questions, maybe they just are not getting what the situation is. So finding that physician and cultivating that relationship is really critical. Our physician really helped work through a difficult situation with my dad not wanting to relinquish his driver's license. And he wasn't going to listen to this whippersnapper daughter of his, but he did eventually listen to the physician that said, I'm going to put a stop to your license if you don't go have this formal driving evaluation done. And that really, you know, who knows what lives that might have saved in the long run. So I really appreciated that.
Right. Benita, how about you? What's your one piece of advice?
I think that caregivers need to understand that they're not alone. We all feel like we're on an island when things happen, and it's hard to know that so many other people are going through the same things that we're going through. So I think thank God for Age Smart, where there's a resource where people can reach out to get help, because folks do feel like they're all alone and they're bumping, you know, going from pillar to post, don't know where to start. They think other folks won't understand what's going on when people have been through a whole lot. And I really agree with Rita a lot about cultivating that physician relationship, because my mom was a part of the Older Adults Assessment Center at WashU. So when it was time for her to stop driving, I didn't have to be the bad guy. You know, the doctor could talk to her and explain, you know, that maybe she should stop. And she was, like I said, she was a traditional person, a traditional woman of her time. So when a man who was a physician recommended that she stop driving, I think she took that better from him than she would have taken it from me. So I just think having someone in your corner, and especially with all the resources that Age Smart has to help you out, I think that that's the most important thing. Reach out to somebody else.
Right. Connie, can you share your one piece of advice?
Well, I'm going to give you two. One is in line with what we've heard so far, is that I had to, I always accompanied my mom to the doctor's office, and the things that needed to be discussed could not be discussed in front of her. So I started sending him emails about a week ahead of our office visit, so that I could communicate to him what the real picture was like. And so he would know when he walked in the room, regardless of what he saw or what he heard, what needed to be dealt with. But in addition to that, I think the most important thing for me was I attended caregiver workshops, sponsored in part by Age Smart, in part by St. John's Community Care. And the one takeaway I had that I benefited from so much was when you're having a conversation with your loved one, no matter how wrong they are, no matter how off base they are, when they're in comments or critiques or whatever, you just have to kind of go along with them and get on their same page. And that's gonna involve doing some fibbing, some lying. My example was my husband passed away. My mom didn't remember that. She would ask about him. And at the first few times I would say, well, Mom, you know, Greg passed away. And then she would get so upset because she didn't remember. So when she asks these days, oh, he's at home watching golf. That she understood, because that's what he did. So, you know, just not arguing, not pushing the topic, but just getting on the same page with them and going along with whatever it is that they are communicating.
Right. That's hard. It's hard. You see people a lot of times trying to change no, that's not right. That's not right. It's like, it's their reality. So you have to, like you say, you have to be where they are. Chris, how about you? What's the one advice from Age Smart that you can give caregivers?
To change my previous answer. And I'm going to say, when you're dealing with a person with dementia, convince yourself and the rest of your family to take the phrase, don't you remember? Out of your language. I watched that phrase get said to my mother-in-law, and it caused agitation for her, for the family member that was doing it. And once we finally convinced to get that out, things settled down.
Right. You know, it's really interesting. So all of you have cared for somebody who's had a memory impairment or dementia, and my mother-in-law was the opposite. She was bright to the very, very end, but her body was just worn out. And I wish, like I've heard Rita say before, that, you know, you have to be persistent to get them in the situation that's going to support them, and to get people to recognize that, you know, sometimes you do have to make changes, and sometimes you do have to adapt where you are at that point. And I'm hoping that my caregiver experience is going to make it easier if my son has to care for us someday, that we'll do the right thing and we'll have all of our ducks in a row. To be honest, I'm sure it won't be easy no matter how it happens. But I want to thank you all for participating today and for sharing your experience, and thanks so much for your time.